This is Deep Night Whispers. Tonight, we open a file that was never meant to be found. In the 1960s, in the fading years of the great American state hospital system, there stood an institution that no longer appears on most official maps. It was called Ravenswood State Hospital. On paper, it was a psychiatric facility. In practice, it was a place for people the world did not want to see again, a place where forgotten people went to be erased. Between 1961 and 1969, Ravenswood recorded a series of quiet, unexplained patient disappearances. There were no escapes reported on the local news, no manhunts, no alarms. The files simply marked them as transferred, released, moved to community care. But there were no transfer destinations, no addresses, no signatures from receiving facilities, just names that stopped appearing on the census rolls, names that vanished like smoke. And one patient who did not disappear in the records, but in the world. His name was Elliot Granger. The last surviving file calls him the only documented escapee from Ravenswood. The truth is worse. He did escape, but he wasn't running from what happened there. He was running from what he had done, and he didn't understand that until it was too late. Ravenswood sat at the edge of a small Midwestern town, surrounded by fields that turned to mud every spring and dust every summer. The main building was a brick monolith from the 1920s, tall, symmetrical, with rows of barred windows and a central tower that once housed a clock. By the 1960s, the clock no longer worked. Neither did much of the building. The air inside always carried the metallic scent of old institutional plumbing, mixed with cheap disinfectant and the faint, bitter smell of regret. Paint peeled in long strips from the hallway walls. Some wings were heated, others were not. Radiators clanged all night, or never came on at all, leaving entire floors trapped in a perpetual icy stillness. The hospital was overcrowded, understaffed, and functioned less as a place of treatment and more as a warehouse of human beings. Patients were categorized more by convenience than diagnosis. Those who slept at night and took their medicine without protest were placed on the quiet wards. Those who screamed, broke things, or fought back were placed somewhere else. The records used terms like disturbed ward, chronic ward, incorrigible wing. The staff used simpler terms when they were off duty. They called them the forgotten floors. They were the places where the sounds of suffering were loudest, but where the world chose not to listen. Elliot Granger arrived at Ravenswood in 1962, at the age of 21. His file lists him as follows: male, white, diagnosis, dissociative phenomena, probable psychosis, history of fugue states, violent episodes with no recall, recommendation, long-term custodial care. He had no family listed as emergency contact. His parents disowned him after the incident. No one visited him. No one called to ask how he was doing. For the state, he simply disappeared into the building. The early notes describe him as calm, compliant, willing to follow directions. Orderlies liked him. Nurses wrote that he helped on the ward, guided weaker patients to the cafeteria, reminded others to take their pills. One staff member wrote, "Granger is highly suggestible, eager to please. Keeps repeating that he wants to make up for things he can't remember. Good candidate for structured routines." He was placed on Ward C2, one of the long-term male wards. C2 was known for its low staff rotation, meaning the patients there stayed for life, and the routine was rigid, predictable, and unchanging. It was here that the disappearances began. The first missing patient from Ward C2 was a man named Robert Hall, age 47. Hall's record describes paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations, and multiple suicide attempts. He had been at Ravenswood for 9 years. Staff knew him well. They were used to his shouting, his fear of shadows, his insistence that someone was moving in the walls. Ironically, Hall was terrified of the dark and always slept with his head tucked under the sheet. In early autumn of 1963, nursing staff performed morning rounds. They counted patients in each bed, as they always did. Hall's bed was empty. His sheet was folded neatly back, and his pillow was centered, just the way the orderlies required it. The linen was still warm from his body, but the man himself was gone. There was no note, no blood, no broken window, no clothing missing from his locker. He was simply gone, as if the ward had breathed him in. The first assumption was elopement, escape. A quick search was conducted of the grounds. The police were notified, as protocol required. A short notice went across the wires to other institutions. Nothing came of it. Within a week, Hall's chart was updated with a single line. Patient transferred. Destination, NA. Transferred to nowhere, to the space between the files. In early 1964, another man disappeared from C2, a 30-year-old with advanced dementia from untreated neurosyphilis. He could barely walk without assistance. He could not manage stairs. The only way he could have left the ward was carried. He went to sleep one night in his bed near the far end of the ward. By morning, he was gone. Again, no broken locks. The only thing disturbed was the dust on the floor near his bed. No signs of a struggle. No reports from other facilities. The note appears again. Patient transferred. Destination, NA. 6 months later, a third patient went missing. All three had one thing in common, aside from their ward assignment. In the week prior to each disappearance, nursing notes mention the same detail. P, seen last in company of E. Granger, being led to day room / recreation / hydrotherapy room / chapel. At the time, it meant nothing. Patients followed each other. They clung to any semblance of routine. A helpful young man who gently guided confused older patients from room to room seemed like an asset, not a risk. So when the disappearances quietly mounted, one in 1963, 2 in 1964, 4 in 1965, no one thought to ask why Elliot Granger appeared as the last recorded contact for a third of them. No one, until much later. The number of patients vanishing eventually totaled 19 before the program ended. In 1966, Ravenswood joined a short-lived federal program designed to modernize psychiatric care. On paper, the project aimed to demonstrate that even long-term institutionalized patients could be prepared for life in the community through structured behavior programs, occupational therapy, and peer-led activity groups. The internal name was Project Threshold. Its unofficial purpose: reduce census numbers without admitting that the hospital was releasing people it had held for decades. Ravenswood was chosen not because of its excellence, but because it was desperate. Funding was shrinking. Public attitudes were shifting. Newspapers were beginning to publish stories about abuses in state hospitals. The superintendent needed something he could point to and say, "We are improving." Project Threshold required subjects who were high-functioning, compliant, and able to influence peers. In the selection notes, one name appears in the margin, circled twice: E. Granger. The program's design was simple in outline, complicated in practice. Certain patients, like Elliot, would be assigned special responsibilities. They would escort other patients to therapy groups, work details, and psychiatric interviews. They would be rewarded with privileges, extra cigarettes, time in the library, the right to walk outside under supervision. The idea was that patients would respond better to someone like them than to uniformed staff. If a resistant patient refused medication, a peer aide might persuade him. If someone refused to attend occupational therapy, a fellow patient might talk him into it. What no one mentioned in the grant application file was this. In an underfunded, understaffed institution, a patient like Elliot was free labor. Someone who could be trusted, or rather assumed to be trusted, to do the quiet, thankless work of moving people from one place to another without needing a salary or benefits. The first threshold memo reads, Granger shows above-average compliance, responds strongly to praise, accepts blame readily, reports foggy memory of prior violent incident. Suggest we direct this guilt into structured, helping roles. To a man like Elliot, who lived with fragments of violence he could not remember, the promise was irresistible. His memory was like a broken film reel, showing him flashes of blood on his hands and the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Help them, they told him. Do this right, and you'll make up for what you did before. Before what? His early records are thin. There is mention of an accident, injured party, court referral, family non-participating. The only clear object mentioned is a broken silver locket found at the scene of the incident, an object he always associated with overwhelming pain. There is no clear description of what brought him to Ravenswood. They took his guilt. They took his confusion, and they turned it into a tool. Under Project Threshold, Elliot was given a white armband with a small blue T painted on it. It marked him as a transition aide. The small gesture made him feel whole. Patients quickly learned that if Elliot came to their door at night or stood beside their chair in the day room and held out a hand, it meant someone wanted them somewhere. To them, he might have looked like a staff member in plain clothes. He walked beside nurses. He carried charts. He used keys. The keys were the best part, the symbol that he was trusted, that he was good. In his own mind, he believed he was doing good. He believed this because they told him so, every week, in the same small therapy room. There, a doctor with a soft voice and cold eyes would say things like, "You remember what you did before you came here, don't you?" Elliot would shake his head, eyes filling with tears. "No, I see blood, but I don't know whose. I hear screaming. I remember that locket and the sound of the crack." And the doctor would lean forward and say, "That sound is why you're here, Elliot. That sound is why you're dangerous. You still could be, but here, you can make up for it. You can help us keep people safe. When someone can't be trusted on the ward, we move them. We make sure they don't hurt themselves or others. You can help. You can lead them. You can do the right thing this time. You can choose to forget the past by fixing the present. Elliot would nod. He always nodded. He was desperate to be told he was doing the right thing. What he did not understand was this. Project Threshold was never fully funded. There were no community placements waiting, no group homes built for long-term patients, no outpatient clinics ready to receive them. What Ravenswood had instead were old spaces, sealed rooms, unused treatment wings, the cold, dark 5th floor where the rats were the only residents, locked sub-basements where records from the 1930s still gathered dust, and a growing pressure from the state, from the newspapers, from the public, to reduce the number of people inside the building. If no one wanted to fund their departures, then their disappearances had to look like departures. Elliot's dissociative episodes became useful. He would lead a patient out of the day room or the dormitory. He always made sure to do it during the shift change, when the hallways were chaotic and the noise of the clanging radiators covered up any sounds of distress. He would unlock a door or hold one open after a staff member had passed through. He would say things like, "They want to talk to you downstairs. Your family is waiting. They said you're going home. We found a better place. They said they found a place where it's quieter, where the voices stop." He would walk with them down the long north corridor, the one where the paint flaked from the ceiling like skin, and where, just past the old hydrotherapy room, there was a steel door that most staff swore did not open anymore. The air in front of that door was always unnaturally warm. Records showed that it did. Behind that door was a service stairwell leading down to an old records basement, and beyond that, an industrial-grade incinerator, which had once been used for hospital waste, but had been converted for a new, terrible purpose. By the 1960s, it was supposed to be out of use. Supposed to be. Elliot's own statements, taken much later, are vague, broken, full of holes. He remembers the keys. He remembers the sound of metal scraping, not from the bed being dragged, but from the enormous heavy incinerator door opening and closing. He remembers the way patients' hands shook as he told them, "It's better down here. They said it's only for a night." He remembers walking back up alone. The air always felt lighter on the walk up. He remembers closing the door. He remembers very clearly the way the staff smiled at him afterward. "Good job, Elliot. You did the right thing. You helped keep everyone safe." And he remembers, because he repeated it like a prayer. "I'm helping now. I'm not hurting them anymore. I'm helping now." Meanwhile, on paper, the hospital census decreased, transferred, released, referred to community care. But there are no corresponding intake forms from any other facility, no phone logs confirming transfers, no families contacted. The patients simply stopped existing. They became the smoke that rose over the fields every morning. And the one patient who walked out of the building in 1969, believing he had escaped, having served his time and made amends, had been the thread that pulled them out of their beds, one by one, and delivered them into the dark. He would not understand this for many years, not until the hospital was gone. Not until the walls were broken. Not until someone else went back down those stairs and found what he had left behind, a layer of fine, gray ash covering the entire floor of the incinerator room, the final census of Ravenswood's forgotten floors.